What happened in Cleveland doesn't feel like just another loss. It feels like the moment everything finally snapped. Because when an NFL owner starts stepping in during the middle of a lost season, it's a sign that something has gone seriously wrong behind the scenes. And according to multiple reports, that's exactly where the Cleveland Browns are right now. Sunday's game didn't just end with another mark in the loss column. It reportedly triggered an internal reaction so severe that it reached the highest level of the organization almost immediately. We're talking about ownership-level concern, emergency conversations, and questions that don't usually get asked until a season is long over. This wasn't about bad luck or injuries. This was about trust, judgment, and a decision that left too many people inside the building stunned. What makes this situation even more explosive is that the controversy doesn't center on a blown coverage or a missed kick. It centers on a rookie quarterback who, by almost every measure, did exactly what you'd hope for in a pressure-filled moment. He kept the team alive. He made plays when they needed them. He looked composed when everything around him was unraveling. And yet, when the game reached its most critical point, he was taken off the field. That single decision has now become the focal point of everything unraveling in Cleveland. Players noticed, fans exploded, and according to reports, the owner himself couldn't believe what he was watching. Because when you finally think you found a quarterback worth building around, the worst thing you can do is send a message that you don't trust him when it matters most. Now that moment is being dissected from every angle, not just by analysts and fans, but by the people who control the future of the franchise. There are whispers of frustration, questions about leadership, and serious doubts about whether the current direction makes any sense at all. And the most unsettling part is this. This doesn't feel like damage control. It feels like the beginning of something much bigger. Because when ownership starts asking hard questions in December, with games still left to play, it usually means the clock has already started ticking, and what happens next could reshape the Cleveland Browns for years to come. The Browns walked into Sunday expecting a routine win, the kind of game you survive quietly and move past without much thought. Tennessee arrived in Cleveland as a team playing out the string, buried near the bottom of the league with only one win all season and nothing left to chase except draft position. On paper, this wasn't supposed to be competitive. Cleveland was heavily favored, playing at home, and desperately needing something positive to cling to in an already lost year. Instead, what unfolded was one of the most deflating losses this franchise has taken in recent memory. The Titans didn't just hang around. They controlled key moments, absorbed every punch, and walked out of Cleveland with a win that left the home crowd stunned and angry. This wasn't a fluky bounce or a last-second miracle. It was a game Cleveland had every reason to win and somehow still managed to give away. The reaction inside the stadium said everything. You could feel the frustration building with every stalled drive and missed opportunity. Fans weren't just upset about the score. They were watching a team that looked disjointed, unsure of itself, and completely disconnected when the pressure rose. For a roster that was supposed to be far more talented than its opponent, that's a brutal realization. Losing to a one-win team at home changes the conversation fast. It strips away excuses. Injuries don't explain it. Bad luck doesn't explain it. At some point, the focus shifts to leadership.
Decision-making. When you're a double-digit favorite and still come up short, the loss stops being about execution and starts being about direction. And that's what made this defeat different from the others that came before it. This wasn't just another chapter in a rough season. This was the kind of loss that forces everyone involved to take a hard look at what's really going on. Because once the final whistle blew, it became clear this wasn't going to stay confined to the field. Something bigger had been set in motion. Amid all of that frustration, one thing stood out in a way no one could ignore. Shedeur Sanders didn't look like a rookie playing in a collapsing season. He looked like a quarterback who was settling in, gaining confidence, and starting to understand how to control an NFL game. From the opening drives, there was a calm to his play that hadn't always been there earlier in the year. He moved the offense with purpose. The ball came out on time. When pressure showed up, he didn't panic or force throws that weren't there. He extended plays with his legs, kept his eyes downfield, and delivered passes in tight windows when the Browns needed them most. This wasn't garbage time production. This was real, competitive football against a defense that knew exactly what was coming. By the time the game reached the fourth quarter, Sanders had quietly put together one of the most impressive performances by any quarterback in the league that week. The yardage piled up, the touchdowns came in critical moments, and more importantly, his teammates responded to him. You could see it in the way the offense moved, in the body language on the sideline, in the belief that the game was still within reach because number 2 was under center. For a franchise that has spent decades searching for stability at quarterback, moments like this don't come often. A late-round rookie showing poise, leadership, and the ability to elevate the players around him changes the entire conversation. Suddenly, the focus shifts from draft position to development, from surviving the season to building something real. That's what made the rest of the night so hard to understand, because as good as Sanders was, as much as he earned the trust of everyone watching, the most important moments were still ahead, and the decision that followed would flip this story on its head. When the Browns clawed their way back into striking distance, the momentum felt real. This was the moment every young quarterback waits for, the chance to finish what he started, to take control when the game is on the line. Shedeur Sanders had just engineered a long, pressure-filled drive, making clutch throws and keeping Cleveland alive when it mattered most. And then, without warning, he wasn't on the field. Instead of trusting the quarterback who had carried the offense down the field, the Browns went in a completely different direction, a wildcat look, a pre-designed call that took the ball out of Sanders' hands entirely. The play failed, confusion set in, and before anyone could fully process what had just happened, it happened again. For the second critical conversion attempt, the decision didn't change. Sanders stayed on the sideline while another gadget look went nowhere. 2 chances, 2 moments where the game could have swung, and 2 times the Browns chose not to trust the one player who had given them life all night. What made the decision even harder to defend was what came out afterward. Kevin Stefanski admitted that this wasn't a reaction to anything that happened in the moment. It wasn't about a
missed read or a shaky snap. The plan had already been made. No matter how well Sanders played on that drive, the call was set before the situation even unfolded. That revelation hit like a gut punch. Because coaching at this level is about adapting to reality, not forcing reality to fit a script. When a quarterback proves he can handle the moment, the worst message you can send is that it doesn't matter. And in that instant, it felt like the Browns chose stubbornness over momentum. The stadium felt it, the sideline felt it, and the fallout didn't end with the final whistle. Because while fans were still trying to understand what they'd just seen, someone else was already preparing to say something that would change everything. Myles Garrett didn't slam the podium, he didn't raise his voice or point fingers, and that's exactly why his words landed as hard as they did. As the face of the franchise and the unquestioned leader of the locker room, Garrett understands how to speak without saying too much. And after the game, he chose his words carefully. He talked about Shedeur Sanders a lot. He praised the rookie's composure, the way he escaped pressure, the way he stepped up when the team needed him. Garrett made it clear that Sanders wasn't overwhelmed by the moment. If anything, he looked more comfortable as the game went on. That kind of endorsement from a veteran defensive star isn't handed out lightly. On the surface, Garrett's comments sounded supportive and professional, but beneath that calm tone was something far more powerful. Every compliment doubled as an unspoken question. If the quarterback looked good, if he came up big, if he showed growth and leadership, then why wasn't he on the field when the game was on the line? Garrett never said the coaching decision was wrong. He didn't have to. His words drew a straight line between Shedeur Sanders' performance and the choice to pull him at the worst possible moment. It was the kind of message that resonates far beyond a press conference. Teammates hear it, coaches hear it, and most importantly, ownership hears it. When a player of Garrett's stature speaks like that, it signals more than frustration. It signals belief. Belief in the quarterback, belief in what the team could be building, and an implied concern that those efforts might be getting undercut. That's not noise you can ignore, especially from someone who has carried the franchise through its darkest years. And according to reports, those words didn't just echo in the locker room, they made their way upstairs. Because once the message reached ownership, the situation stopped being about one game and started becoming something much more serious. According to reports coming out of the organization, Jimmy Haslam's reaction to all of this was immediate and intense. This wasn't the distant frustration of an owner watching another loss pile up in a lost season. It was the kind of reaction that comes when something feels fundamentally wrong. Sources suggest Haslam watched the final moments of that game with disbelief, struggling to understand why the quarterback who had just brought the team back wasn't being trusted when everything was on the line. What reportedly struck him most wasn't just the failed plays themselves, but the reasoning behind them. When word spread that the decision to go Wildcat had been locked in ahead of time, regardless of how Shedeur Sanders performed, it raised serious concerns. From Haslam's perspective, this wasn't about one play call. It was about philosophy, about whether the coaching staff was truly aligned with the long-term future of the franchise. Haslam's history with quarterbacks makes this situation even more charged. Since taking over the Browns, he's watched one supposed solution after another fall apart. High draft picks, veteran signings, short-term fixes, none of it ever stuck. And now, for the first time in years, there's a young quarterback showing signs of real promise. Reports claim Haslam was furious at the idea that this progress could be slowed, or worse, damaged by a lack of trust at the most critical moments. Myles Garrett's comments only added fuel to that reaction. According to people close to the situation, hearing the team's most respected leader openly praise Sanders' composure and growth confirmed what Haslam had already been thinking. This wasn't just fan outrage or media noise. This was a respected veteran essentially validating concerns about how the situation was being handled. That's when the tone reportedly shifted from frustration to action. Haslam began reaching out to key figures inside the organization, demanding explanations. Why was Sanders pulled? Who signed off on the decision? And most importantly, does the head coach truly believe in the quarterback he's supposed to be developing? Those questions didn't come from curiosity, they came from concern. And when an NFL owner starts asking those kinds of questions this late in the season, it usually leads to something that doesn't happen quietly. Because once ownership starts feeling like its most important asset is at risk, patience disappears fast. Not long after the dust settled, reports began circulating that changed the entire tone of the situation. This wasn't just internal frustration anymore. Jimmy Haslam was calling for an emergency board meeting, and that detail alone is what separates this moment from every other disappointing loss the Browns have endured over the years. Emergency meetings don't happen because of one bad play or one emotional reaction. They happen when ownership believes the direction of the franchise itself needs to be questioned. According to sources, this meeting wasn't framed as a routine end-of-season review or a standard debrief. It was described as a serious, urgent conversation about leadership, philosophy, and whether the current approach is actually protecting the team's future. At the center of those discussions is one unavoidable question. Does Kevin Stefanski truly believe in Shedeur Sanders as the Browns' quarterback going forward? Because if he does, the decisions made on Sunday don't line up with that belief. And if he doesn't, that signals a deeper disconnect that can't be ignored, especially when the organization appears to have finally found a young quarterback worth committing to. Timing is what makes this so unusual. There are still games left to play, the season isn't over. Typically, owners wait until January to have these conversations behind closed doors. The fact that this is happening now suggests something has already crossed a line. It implies that this wasn't viewed as a simple mistake, but a warning sign of a larger issue. The meeting is also reportedly focused on what happens next, not just what already happened. How will the final games be handled? Will Sanders be given full control of the offense in pressure moments, or will the same rigid approach continue? And if the coaching philosophy doesn't change, is that something the organization can afford to accept?
These aren't small adjustments being discussed. They're foundational questions about trust, adaptability, and long-term vision. And once those questions reach the boardroom in December, it usually means the margin for error has already disappeared. Anytime Jimmy Haslam's name comes up in conversations like this, there's an unavoidable history that follows. Around the league, he's known as an owner who doesn't wait long when things go south. Since taking over the Browns, he cycled through head coaches at a pace that's become a running joke in NFL circles. Stability has been promised more times than it's been delivered. That reputation matters because it's the first thing critics point to when Haslam gets involved. Another coaching change, another reset, another sign that Cleveland can't get out of its own way. On the surface, this situation looks like more of the same, an owner overreacting to a bad season and preparing to pull the plug again. But this moment doesn't quite fit that familiar pattern. This isn't a knee-jerk response to a few losses piling up. The season was already gone. Expectations were already low. What changed was the emergence of a quarterback who might actually represent a future worth protecting. That's the difference. When you've spent over a decade watching quarterback after quarterback fail, you don't ignore signs of real progress when they finally appear. Haslam knows how damaging constant turnover can be. He's been criticized for it for years. And yet, there's also a reality he can't escape. Sometimes doing nothing is more harmful than making another change, especially if standing pat means risking the confidence and development of the most important position in sports. That's the tension hanging over this entire situation. Is this just another example of impatience, or is this the rare moment where the concern is actually justified? Because from Haslam's point of view, allowing a philosophical disconnect between coach and quarterback to linger could set the franchise back yet again. And that's what makes this decision so uncomfortable. For once, there's no obvious right answer, but there is one unavoidable truth. Whatever choice is made now will be tied directly to what happens with Shedeur Sanders next. For Shedeur Sanders, this situation is about far more than one missed opportunity. Moments like the ones on Sunday shape how young quarterbacks see themselves and how they believe the organization sees them. Confidence at this level isn't built through words alone. It's built when the game is tight, the pressure is high, and the coach still puts the ball in your hands. Sanders had earned that moment. He didn't look overwhelmed. He didn't shrink. If anything, he looked like a player growing into the role faster than anyone expected. Taking him off the field in that situation sends a message, whether intended or not. It suggests hesitation. It suggests doubt. And for a rookie trying to establish himself, that kind of mixed signal can linger longer than any interception ever could. Development isn't just about reps or statistics. It's about trust. When a quarterback knows his coach believes in him, he plays freer, reacts faster, and takes command of the offense. When that trust feels conditional, it can create hesitation, second-guessing, a split second of doubt that makes all the difference in this league. There's also the locker room dynamic to consider. Teammates rally around quarterbacks they believe in, but they also notice when decisions don't align with performance. When a rookie plays well and still gets sidelined in the biggest moments, it raises quiet questions, not just for the quarterback, but for everyone watching how leadership operates. That's why this situation matters so much. Sanders represents possibility for a franchise that hasn't had much of it. Mishandling that moment doesn't just risk one game, it risks slowing the growth of a player who might finally be capable of changing the Browns' long-term story.
And with every decision now under a microscope, the next few weeks will matter more than anyone expected. From this point forward, the Browns are staring at two very different paths, and neither comes without risk. If Kevin Stefanski remains in charge, the expectation won't just be patience, it will be change. Real, visible change. That means adjusting his approach, trusting what's happening on the field, and fully committing to Shedeur Sanders in the moments that matter most. Anything less will feel like the same problem dressed up as progress. Staying the course would signal belief in continuity and structure. It would suggest that Sunday was a lesson, not a verdict. But that belief comes with pressure. Every late-game decision, every high-leverage snap will be scrutinized through the lens of trust. If Sanders isn't empowered going forward, the questions that started this crisis won't fade. They'll get louder. On the other side is the possibility of a clean break. Moving on from Stefanski would be a dramatic move, especially given his past success and the stability he once brought to Cleveland. But a fresh voice could also mean a clean slate for a young quarterback, a new staff built around development, a system designed to grow with Sanders instead of limiting him when things get uncomfortable. That option carries its own dangers. Another coaching change means another reset, new terminology, new expectations, another gamble that this time will be different. For a franchise already known for instability, it's not a decision taken lightly. And that's what makes this moment so defining. This isn't just about wins and losses anymore. It's about alignment, about whether the head coach and the quarterback are moving in the same direction. Because if they aren't, the Browns will be forced to choose. And once that choice is made, there's no going back. No matter what happens next, this game against the Titans won't be remembered as just another loss in a forgettable season. It will be remembered as the moment everything converged. The night a rookie quarterback showed he might be something real. The night a veteran leader quietly spoke up. And the night ownership reportedly decided it could no longer look the other way. Shedeur Sanders didn't just play well, he changed the conversation. His performance forced uncomfortable questions about trust, development, and whether the people in charge are truly aligned with the future they claim to be building. Myles Garrett's words gave those concerns credibility, and Jimmy Haslam's reported reaction elevated them to the highest level of the organization. This is the crossroads the Browns seem to find themselves at again, except this time the stakes feel different. There's actual hope on the field, something tangible, and that makes every decision heavier, every mistake more costly. Protecting that hope may require patience, or it may require change, but ignoring it isn't an option anymore. What makes this moment so dangerous is that the wrong move won't just affect this season, it could echo for years. A young quarterback's confidence, a locker room's belief, a franchise's direction, all of it now hangs in the balance because of what happened in just a few plays. The emergency meeting, the growing tension, the unanswered questions, none of this feels settled. If anything, it feels like the opening chapter of a much larger story. Leaks will surface, reactions will follow, and every snap over the final stretch of the season will be watched through a very different lens. The Browns have been here before, standing at a fork in the road, but rarely with this much clarity about what's at stake. One path leans toward continuity and trust, the other toward change and risk. Whichever direction they choose will define not just Kevin Stefanski's future, but the future of Shedeur Sanders and maybe the franchise itself.